Hello and welcome to the first podcast of 2021 from About Manchester. Today we talk to Nick Buckley MBE. Nick is the Chief Executive of the Manchester charity Mancunian Way. He set up the charity 9 years ago with his redundancy money and savings after leaving Manchester Council. The charity describes itself as community engagement specialists. It was set up after the Manchester riots in the summer of 2011, in its words, to ensure that the next generation of Mancunians didn't find themselves making the same mistakes as the small minority that went before. Last summer, Nick found himself in hot water after he wrote a blog post criticising aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement. In 5 short weeks, his life was turned upside down. Since then, he has become a champion of the right to free speech, is in the process of writing a book, and has set up a new website. I'll tell you what, I'm going to throw a quote that's on your new website at you. I have a duty to fight against this far left woke Marxist intolerance that aims to bear down and destroy everything that our forefathers built. What do you mean by that?
So at the moment, I feel as a nation and as the West in general, we seem to be having a complex that everything we've developed over hundreds of years is nasty, evil, and I just don't see it. I see that our society is still unfair, and there's things we need to do to carry on improving the lives of everybody, and especially the poor. That work needs to happen, but I don't see how we help the poor by trying to reinvent something that failed in the 20th century, which is Marxism and communism. And I feel that's what we're trying to do. And every country has done things wrong, but I feel the UK has done lots of things right as well. And we've made such headway in my lifetime over the last 100 years that I don't see where this is coming from, apart from a revolution.
Okay, just expand on that, Nick. Into what do you feel went wrong in the 21st century? You talk about Marxism, Leninism, communism, but what actually happened? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we never had a Marxist or a Leninist or a communist government. So what happened in the 20th century that you feel that we got wrong?
So the UK didn't have a Marxist government because the UK have always rejected the far left and the far right. We're a very centrist nation. But if you look across Europe, you look across the world in the 20th century, from Russia to China to North Korea to Venezuela to Angola, and we look at all these countries in different continents with different people, with different coloured skin, with different religions and different cultures. Marxism has always failed in every single one of those countries. And the way I sort of talk about it to my friends is, on paper, socialism seems amazing and it's fair and it looks like that's what we should be aiming for. But we forget one thing about socialism and communism, and that's me and you. Humans are flawed. Humans are greedy. Humans are nasty. Humans can be self-centered, power crazy. So once you put human traits into the mix, that's how those systems then become corrupted. And you look at the deaths throughout the 20th century due to Marxism and communism, and we're talking in the tens of millions, and the oppression. And I thought we'd got away from all that when the Berlin Wall fell in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got a generation of young people now who have no concept of history because our education system is quite poor when it comes to history. And this has been reinvented again in the universities of, look at this utopia that we can achieve. If we can only implement proper socialism, this is what we can achieve. But we've tried it all before. These are failed ideas. And I just don't want us to go down that path again.
The flaws that you talk about in the human character, surely that's the same for under whatever regime, whether it's a left-wing regime, a centrist regime, or a right-wing regime.
So your question basically was, why is this particular to communism, Marxism, and why doesn't it affect all other systems?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, I'll answer that. So the human traits I talked about are in everybody, in every system, in every country. The difference with Marxism and communism is the fact that it propels certain people to the top who then have uncontrollable power. And that's what corrupts the system. In other systems, in our democracies at the moment, there's checks and balances. People go on about Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter, but people go on about Trump. He's a fascist, he's a Nazi. But every single thing along the way, there's been balances through, from the courts, through the Senate. And that's what we have in our democracies in the West. When we get Marxism and communism, that power is more centralized, because the whole idea is to hand power over to the state, because the state knows best. I've worked for government. The state doesn't know best. The state is incompetent. The state is wasteful. The state is bureaucratic. When I worked for government, all we ever cared about, or my bosses ever cared about, was the process. This is what you do. This is the step-by-step thing you do. I had a boss once say to me, I don't care if it works or not. This is what we do in this department. And that's what government's like. So we need less government, not more government. And Marxism, communism, socialism is all about handing more and more power over to the state in the belief that the state knows best. And I'm adamant the state doesn't know best.
How do you feel about now? Because surely the government in this country is playing such a huge part in our lives, telling us what we can and can't do in the ways that the British people have never had to put up with before. What do you think of that?
Oh, I'm absolutely shocked. And I don't think this government or the next government are going to be totalitarian and, turn into Nazis. But, 10 governments from now, we don't know where this is going to lead. We've now set a dangerous precedence in this country that the government can take away our freedoms and our rights if they claim a public health emergency. And this is a precedence that I never thought would set in this country. And if not a year ago, if somebody else would have done this, our government and our people would have been outraged and would have been calling them Nazis and would have been saying this isn't acceptable in a free democratic country. But we've got it here. I understand COVID's dangerous. I'm not one of those silly people who say there is no virus. Of course there's a virus. Of course it's killing people. Of course it's dangerous, and we need to do something about it. That's a given. But have we gone too far? And I think we have. When we've got the British police arresting and stopping people marching on the streets who are protesting the loss of their freedom, then these are dangerous times for the future. Not for now, but for the future.
Could you sort of say, it's a public health issue at the moment, Nick, but do you think this could be a precedent for other, let's say, in inverted commas, national emergencies?
Of course. I mean, with a little bit of trickery, you can call almost anything a public health emergency. So, we don't want people gathering, protesting another government bill. So we can say there's a potential of another, we've heard rumors of another virus. Who knows if there's a virus or not, unless you're a medical trained person, you wouldn't know. So the government then wants to control us. So, eating fatty food, drinking alcohol is all, we know it's in excess, it's bad for you. So the government can clamp down on that. There's almost nothing now the government can't clamp down on by claiming a public health emergency or, a terrorist emergency. We've given the government far too much power over our lives.
Okay. Well, just staying with it, I don't want to concentrate too much on the COVID thing, but what do you think that they should be doing as opposed to what they are doing?
I'm a big believer in personal responsibility and personal freedom. So the government are there to facilitate what the public wants, not what the government thinks best for the public. And that's a real big difference. So the government should be looking at the science and advising us what they would advise for us to do. We need to be protecting the vulnerable. So we know, the over 60s, 70s, 80s, people with additional health concerns. We need to be protecting them. And everybody else, we need to give them advice and tell them to be safe. And then we need to leave it up to them to do what they want to do. This nanny state we've now created where we're not allowed to leave our houses, we're not allowed to go out for exercise, or you can get arrested now if what you're doing outside is deemed not to be in line with government guidance or the law. It's just too much. It's definitely too much. Government's there to advise the public, not to demand off the public.
Even because the government's argument in all this has been that they're protecting lives and they can't on their watch. And I think Boris Johnson said that I can't allow all these deaths on my watch. What would you say to that?
But we send soldiers off to war and they lose their lives. And if we would have accepted the agreement of Hitler in the 30s, there wouldn't have been a Second World War, and we would have saved millions of lives then as well. So people die. This sounds awful, but people die every day. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, do you want to die a free person or do you want to die a slave? And I know that sounds harsh and it might be a little bit exaggerated at the moment for today, but we need to always be thinking about a decade from now, 2 decades from now. It's the precedents I don't like of how easy the government have taken away all our freedoms.
Okay, I understand that. Can we go back to the events of last summer? Because you wrote a blog, and I suppose your world exploded, didn't it?
My world definitely exploded. I never saw that coming. It wasn't my intention. It caught me off guard completely.
Can you just tell people sort of what happened during those few weeks?
Yeah, so at the beginning of June, we'd already had the death of George Floyd in America. Black Lives Matter had come to the fore. I'd never really heard of the group before. We had mostly peaceful riots in London. We had demonstrations and protests in other cities, including Manchester, that were completely peaceful. And I did some research on the organisation Black Lives Matter, and I didn't like what I read. A Marxist organisation who want to defund the police, overthrow capitalism, blame everything on white supremacy. And for me, they were not appropriate for the UK. And I spoke to some of my friends, and none of them knew anything about Black Lives Matter apart from it was an anti-racist grassroots movement that had come out of the death of that one man. And I had to explain to them the history. So I wrote a blog, 600-word blog, put it on LinkedIn based on what I read on their website. It was there for a couple of weeks. It was fine. Some people disagreed with me, which is absolutely fine because I don't profess to know everything. Some people emailed me and phoned me up saying, they really enjoyed that, but they don't want to comment on it publicly because it's a touchy subject. And I remember thinking at the time, touchy subject. We live in a free country with free speech. My arguments were polite and factual. I just thought they just woofed over nothing. How little did I know that they were completely right. So then someone copied the link off LinkedIn and put it on Twitter after about a fortnight, and then it went crazy. People on Twitter were calling me a Nazi, a racist. People then started emailing. I founded and I run a charity in Greater Manchester called Mancunian Way. People then wrote to the board, emailed the board saying I'm a racist, I'm a Nazi, they need to sack me. Somebody then set up an online petition to have me fired. That gained 450 signatures. And all the way through this, it was uncomfortable, but I was thinking, these are just nutcases. It'll all blow away. It'll all go away in a couple of days next week. It'll be fine. It's my charity. I founded it. But what I didn't expect was for the board who I appointed to be cowards. That's the only word I can describe.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw the issues on the Facebook and decided to sack me immediately.
I remember we spoke, didn't we, on
Yes.
the phone when this was going on, and you know, you were. It was just this had just happened. That you'd just been dismissed. What were you feeling then? What were you feeling inside you about what had happened?
I think shame. That was the biggest feeling. Was I thought everybody was laughing at me. All I kept saying to myself was, "What has your big mouth gotten you into now?" I've always been someone who spoke my mind. People don't always like to hear my opinion, but if you ask me a question, I'll give you the truthful answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought I'd finally crossed the line, and maybe I had crossed the line. And I was a beaten man for the first week. I was absolutely a beaten man. Didn't want to speak to anybody. Didn't want to see anybody. All I kept thinking was, those idiots on Twitter think they've won, and they have won. And now I'm just a laughing stock. And then after about a week, I started hearing a little voice deep down inside, which was my conscience saying, "What are you doing? Why are you lying down? Why are you taking this? This isn't like you. People will think you're guilty because you're not even answering anybody. You're not fighting back." And I decided to take the advice I've given thousands of young people when I work on the streets and when I've on these youth projects. And the advice I've given thousands of young people is, life isn't fair, mate. Don't think life's ever fair. Bad things happen to good people. And what you need to do is you need to stand back up, brush yourself down, and you need to carry on. That's what you need to do to be successful. And don't think you're a victim, and don't feel sorry for yourself, and don't accept pity off other people. Get on with life, get up and get on. And I had to take my own advice. So I mounted a fight back. I decided I wasn't taking it. I got national press attention. That shut up all the idiots on Twitter. The day I got national press attention, no one commented on me again on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then I decided then to take on the board. So I got a solicitor involved. We looked at all the evidence and the email chains and my contract. And it was deemed they'd broke the contract with me. So I threatened to sue them individually and personally unless they resigned. So they appointed a new board that I approved, and then they all resigned en masse, and I was reappointed back into my position.
Have you ever regretted writing that piece, looking back on it now?
No,
6 months on.
I didn't regret it during that first week when I was a shell of the person I am. The only thing I would change is I would have spent a little bit more time on the article. I would have made some points clearer. It took me 40 minutes to write. If I knew it was going to get national attention, I'd have spent several hours on it.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I'd have done differently, as I would have made my points a lot clearer.
You wrote not long after that, or around that sort of time, that you took on the mob and you'd won, but then something inside me said I'd won nothing. What did you mean by that?
I read a tweet that someone commented on one after so-called won and got my job back. Someone commented on one of the posts on Twitter. And it was not a decent, it was a decent post. It wasn't insulting. Somebody commented that I may have got my job back, but I haven't won because no one lost. And I read it thinking, that's a bit cryptic. What does this person mean? And I thought about it, the more I realized I haven't won. In fact, I've still lost. You know, the 4 people on the board, 3 of them had been friends of mine for, one over a decade, 2 of them for nearly a decade.
Mm-hmm.
We socialized together. They were really good friends. I've lost friends over this. I lost months of my life when my first grandchild was born, where, I wasn't at the beginning the granddad I should have been.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost. I haven't won. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized I may have got my job back and I may have got control of my charity back, and that's fine and fantastic. But the people who did this to me are the same sort of people who will do it to somebody else. And I'm not the sort of person who can just pull up the ladder now and go, "Oh, that was a close call. I've got my life back. Everyone can just look after themselves." And that's when I decided, no, this needs confronting. This new cancel culture, the way we're attacking people, the way we're losing freedom of speech and expression, the way that everyone's being classed as a Nazi or a racist for saying something that was okay to say last year. No, I can't have this anymore now. And I need to be part of the fight against this. I need to be one of the voices that people can hear and which reassures them, where they go, oh, if he can say this, that's what I believe as well. So what I believe isn't wrong because he believes it as well and other people believe it. So I just want to be a voice out there now for common sense.
Do you think you are the voice of the silent majority?
I wouldn't want to claim that because you'd need quite an ego to start talking about that. Any one individual represents millions of other people.
But in terms of you appear to be implying that a lot of people won't say things because it's not politically correct. Is that right?
That's my feeling and my impression over the last decade, if not longer, that people go along with this. It used to be called political correctness. Now it's called woke ideology, progressivism. People go along with it for an easy life. But behind closed doors, these same people tell me they think it's a load of rubbish. So I think the silent majority, basically the silent majority need to stop being silent.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think people are silent?
Part of it is they don't understand the topics and where this is leading to. Mm-hmm. So, some of it is just, wordplay. So if I've got to say these words instead of these old words, I'll do it. It's just for an easy life. So some of it is that. Some of it is fear because they look around what's happened to other people, such as me, and people they know. And I don't fancy any of that happening to me. So the best way is just keep my head down and do as I'm told, especially if you want promotion in a job. If you're looking to get a job, we call young people now, especially university students, snowflakes because they're that upset about stuff. But when you think about it, they're quite right too. They've seen friends on Facebook and Twitter be attacked for using the wrong word. They've seen people who've left university then become almost unemployable because they used wrong terminology. And we wonder why our young people now are absolutely terrified and are suffering from anxiety because they don't know what is right or wrong anymore because no one does. It's changing on a daily basis. So they're completely paranoid. They're going to ruin their life at 18, 19, 20. And I'd be a snowflake if I was them as well because nobody knows anymore.
Do you? I would imagine from this you're not a fan of social media.
I am. Social media is a tool.
But has it not amplified this? I mean, this was obviously happening in the days before Twitter and Facebook were invented, but has it not made it so much easier for people to, from a distance, sit and criticize?
It has, which also means it should be easier to fight back.
Okay.
Social media is a tool. When we invented the printing presses so many hundred years ago, that was deemed as far too much technology in someone's hand because we could spread the written word. Technologies are technologies. It's the people who misuse it. Or maybe they don't misuse it. Maybe I only say they misuse it because I don't agree with their message. We need to fight bad ideas with better ideas, not with blaming technology and banning stuff.